Today I'm back at Microsoft at the garage to interview one of Microsoft's design researchers, Steve Scallen. I'll be honest, I don't know much about researchers and what they do, as this career field seems really big and diverse. So I'm really excited to find out what a researcher does and how someone who is interested in this career, what they should do and how they should approach it. What are we waiting for? Let's go. Alright, so to start off, one of my biggest questions was what exactly does a researcher do?
Yeah, fundamentally, as a broad class of things, you could describe it as a researcher fundamentally goes out, explores data, collects data, summarizes it, synthesizes it with the point of doing something with it. The thing that differentiates research jobs is what is the data about and who are you trying to get somebody to do something with? What are you trying to get done? So there's lots of different contexts. If you have passion or affinity to numbers, you can think about researching data from a numerical perspective, from a statistical perspective. That data could be about people, demographics, that data could be about markets, and then you think about how to collect that data. Becoming a researcher is about developing techniques and practices to collect it, to analyze and summarize it, and then to derive insight that allows people to do something with it. So you could explore that in the context of what is the data about? Is it from people? Is it about numbers? Is it about markets? Is it about the earth? Is it about the environment? And then analytically, it's how do you understand that data, summarize it, and synthesize it, and then who are you trying to go impact? Are you trying to impact people who are building things, or who are managing things, buying things, or marketing things, or selling things? So research as a generic skill is super applicable to many different jobs and roles, and is right for people who are passionate about lots of different things. So it's a very broad spectrum.
So, for example, what exactly do you do as a researcher at Microsoft in terms of do you have a specific project, or is just generally is what data are you looking for?
Yeah, so there's two types of roles when we think about, there are many types of roles, but we'll call it two broad classifications of roles. There's what we call maybe technology researcher. These are folks that are highly specially trained to research the use of technologies. These are people that are exploring technical areas in order to develop technology, and that's we call that's a research profession at the company. Then in almost every field and any profession at Microsoft, there is a role called research. The one that I'm attached to, my background is in design research. So I'm part of engineering. For 15 years I was part of engineering, and I was part of groups that made products, and my role in that was to do research with customers with the goal of impacting the design of the product. So what I know how to do is I know how to understand how people use things. I know how to understand whether that's going well or not. I know how to gather data about what they're doing and what they want to do and what troubles they're having. But in engineering, we call that UX research or design research, because the goal is to improve the design of the product. So I was aligned to design teams. But in every different profession in the company, whether that's finance or HR or sales, there's a research role that has to go with understanding that data. So in sales, there are people who have expertise in understanding sales data with the goal of understanding what sales are going well and what opportunities exist. There are people in marketing that can understand data from the perspective of who we're reaching and whether that message is being effective. And so again, you see research show up in almost every profession that we have in the company.
Yeah, I never really thought about it like that. So as a design researcher, because that I think in engineering classes we actually had someone play that role.
Correct.
Can you speak more on how are you conducting the data, the surveys yourself, or do you have someone doing that for you and you're analyzing the data? What exactly what would your day kind of look like?
Fundamentally, well, so fundamentally you are trained in all the skills that would be required to gathering data. And when you talked about survey, there's lots of different techniques. That's a method, so you would have a portfolio of methods that you would use to gather information about whether design is effective, or to essentially talk to customers about their experience, what they want and what they need. I think typically for a design researcher, their day-to-day feels like they are working with a team that's making a product, and at every stage of that product, they're conducting the research that helps inform the plan, the design, the execution, or the finish of that work. Some of that is tied to where is that product at. You can imagine at the beginning, when we're thinking about, okay, well, what do we do next? We made something and customers are using it. Questions, if you think about research as a response to questions, questions could be, what are people doing with the product now? What do they like about it? What do they don't like about it? What do they want to do next? Who's using it? How well is that going? And that would, when we think about the impact of that research and how it drives people to action, that might inform a plan for what comes next. As we start making maybe the initial phases of the product, is how do we involve the customer very early in our plan and what we intend to do, as a way to help validate that our plan is going to actually satisfy them, fulfill their needs, enable what they want to enable. As the product begins to develop more and more, we may have actual things to show to customers, and they can play a role in help refining the actual execution of the design. And when we're done, or when the product is near done, we may begin to think about how to most effectively put that in customers' hands that allows them to get started quickly and with success, and how we can provide information about how well we executed on the original vision and goal of the product.
So you mentioned like researchers are taught this portfolio of like method. So what is like a recommended, I guess, educational path a researcher should take? Like if, say like right now I'm like, I want to be a researcher so bad, how do I learn about, the different methods, the different types of careers? Like, how do I learn about that?
There's a couple ways you can go about it, because I want everybody to be inspired by the flexibility that are out there. So there's one way. There are places and courses and programs at school that teach and provide a curriculum about, we'll call it human-centered design, user experience design, user experience research. Some of these programs, end to end, have been initiated at schools. I think the things they all have in common can also be gathered by collecting different experiences. I say that because I'm an old person, and when I was back in school, many of these programs weren't yet fully designed at schools, and so I spent my time in psychology departments understanding how people think and the psychology of people. I took statistics classes and analysis classes. I took methodology and design classes. I understood human-computer interaction and ergonomics. And collectively, all that information, I think, adds to your ability to look at a question and then understand what technique to match that in order to answer the question.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So then, I guess like when companies are looking for like hiring a researcher, are they looking for like, these different experiences that kind of would help, like this knowledge that someone can bring to the table? Or are they looking more for like personality traits? Or is it like a combination? Because I feel like if you're constantly working with other people, you're going to need some like personality.
Yeah, a company who is looking for somebody to fill a role. That role is going to be in a business group or a department. And so if that is a role in finance, first and foremost, that company is always looking for is, do they have the fundamental training in this area? Do they have fundamental training in finance? Second is, do they have the training in the specific job role? If that's research, do they have a research background in the area of finance? The third thing they're looking for is, do they have practical experience? Have they evolved from learning the fundamental and the practitioner part to actually putting that into action? And then finally, they're actually looking at that person. I think one thing that people underestimate is, people don't hire You don't look at a person as just a bag of skills. You look at them as a collaborator, as a leader, as somebody that you work with. And that set of personality traits and competencies goes a long way, because the investment that a company makes is in a person. Because we can always learn things. We can, well, you know, your role will require you to learn new things as well. And so those attributes of a person are very, very important. The best thing you're ever going to make and do, you're going to do with other people. And it's because those people are committed and they're passionate and they're people that you want to work with.
So, kind of with all that, so you talk a lot about like this kind of like having, you know, this area of expertise and like knowledge, passion too for like a certain area. So as a researcher, what kind of makes a researcher like really special and unique? You know, like what kind of makes them successful? I think we'll look at it from a mindset, because I'm not a big proponent of looking at, again, people as sort of just, you know, bags of skills, because anyone can learn a technique and you can always learn the practitioner part of it. I think the mindset is what's more important. And I think people who are drawn to research have a mindset that I think is principally about curiosity. I think they have the ability to turn most things into questions, because that's that fundamental part of research, is somebody wants to know something because they want to do something, and you have that innate ability to sort of turn that into a question, and that's a question that you can go answer. And you answer it by applying a technique and gathering and synthesizing data. I think the researcher is also capable of synthesizing things, because there's lots of data, there's no shortage of data available. Making sense of it, looking into this big mass of things and understanding what it's telling you is one of the key attributes of the researcher. So I think they have ability to look at things and then synthesize it. And then being successful in the job is helping people go do something with it. Because all the data in the world and understanding it still doesn't tell you what to go do with it. And I think that the researcher has, in job roles, has the ability to say, here are the important things to go do. Here are the things, of all the options, here are the ones that we should go down the road with. Yeah. So personally, like kind of just in your own like work day, can you tell me what like a bad day would look like?
A bad day would look like when I have a question and I've gathered some information, or I've analyzed some data, or I've looked at the source and I can't make sense of it. Because not all things are sensible. Yeah. And sometimes the best design question, the best designed research still doesn't answer the question, still doesn't arrive at synthesis, still doesn't tell me what to do. That's a bad day, because I've used all my skill and all my training to do something I thought would work, and then when I look at the data, it just doesn't work out. It's just mush.
So what do you do in that? Like,
you learn from that. Our growth mindset is you learn from that. It tells you something, it just doesn't tell you what you need to know. And so you learn from it, you reformulate, replan, you re-execute, and you embrace that, what we'll call that, maybe even that sense of failure as some way to propel you forward. An example would be, you know, when we think about, I'll just have a survey, I'll just ask a questionnaire, and then that way I'll learn something, I'll learn what people want to tell me. And then you do that, and through the best techniques and all your professional training, you do that in the best way, and then the data you get back is just sort of variable. It didn't really answer it. Half the people want this and half the people want that. And so, you know, what do we go do? Well, I don't know. Half the people wanted one thing, half the people wanted. So then you have to sort of look at that and say, okay, that's telling you something, and you have to go at this a different way.
Yeah. So you mentioned kind of like with this, you have to like, I'm guessing it's very like time consuming, you know, if you have, but you mentioned that researcher, like through every step of like the process, you're kind of conducting all this research. What about deadlines, right? How do you conduct all this time in a certain amount of deadline, or is it very flexible?
Yeah. You know, there's the theory of doing something, and the, you know, time and energy and resources are infinite. And then there's the world that we work in. And there are constraints. And so you do the best possible job and the most professional thing given the time, energy, and constraints that you're working in. If you had forever to work on a term paper, that's one thing, but the term papers due. And so that's a constraint, and you just map back from the schedule, you make choices about what's possible given what the constraints, and then you do the best job that you can given the constraints that you're working in.
So on a bit of a lighter note, what does a really good day look like? Not an average day, but like you show up, you're like, oh my god, this is amazing, and it just really lifts you up.
Yeah, you've heard stories of invention, that aha moment. Well, for research, there's this moment of discovery. You found something that you didn't expect, something that was new, something that was novel. And I think that moment where you feel like, aha, I discovered something. The data told me something. The research told me something. I didn't know what I was going to find, but when I executed it, I discovered something, and there's meaning and purpose and impact behind it. It's an inspiring moment. It's the end of a long cycle of something, and then you discovered something.
Wow, like that answer is like really like, wow, that sounds amazing.
It is. It's really fulfilling. It brings what I'll call meaning and purpose to the work. What makes people happy? There's two big things that make people happy. There's meaning and purpose of your work, and there are people that you work with. And if you think about, I'm old enough and experienced enough to know that a lot of things change around that. The actual work you do and who you actually work with, that evolves and changes over time. But those things sort of never change. If I come in and I feel meaning and purpose in my work, I feel it's fulfilling. Right? And that way on a good day, I'm coming back in the next day. But on a bad day, I'm still coming back in the next day because I find meaning and purpose in the work. And I think what people underestimate is being around other people who are driven, who have passion, and who have energy makes a big difference. Yeah. And that sustains over time as well.
How flexible do you think, because, here you are, you have these constraints, and you're also coming up with a plan, you need time, you need resources, and, you're telling a team, are you, telling a team, here's what I want to do, and then they, help you do it? Or the team tells you, this is what we want, go do that? Who's really making decisions?
Yeah, I would characterize it more as a collaboration.
Okay.
We're working systemically to make something. And as part of that collaboration, we're working together. We just have different roles. Okay. Right? Because remember, our objective, particularly, in this context of working at, if you're working as part of a product development group, your ultimate objective is to make something awesome to customers and ultimately impact and improve their lives. That's the magic. That's what you're driven by. The thing you're making is making a difference to somebody's life somewhere, or the planet, or the community that you live and work in. That's what drives you. As a group of people, we have different backgrounds, we have different skills, we have different areas of, specialty and secret sauce. And the collaboration is just to use them all for that purpose.
I just thought of this question because, as someone who hangs out a lot around people who just graduated college, they're constantly talking about their new jobs. Mm-hmm. So something I always hear is that some people like the fact that they can show up to work, and then when work is done, they can leave, and they leave their work, in their building. But I feel like with, being a researcher, because it's a lot about that mindset, that growth mindset, do you feel that, even after you leave the office and you go home, you're still thinking, you still are working on, whatever you're working on?
Yeah. So I can certainly respect people who have figured out how to maybe compartmentalize their life. I think the experience, both my own and the ones that I've been part of for my 23 years here, I think it's more that people you're driven and you're passionate, and it's not so much about separating things, it's just like being your authentic self in every place that you are. And so I don't think about, turning off my brain or my machine or my researchness when I leave, because I'm still the same person walking out to my car and going home at night. I just think about, how am I authentic when I'm here at work? How am I authentic when I'm not? And how am I present? And sort of just managing that, consistently over time. Because I'm one person, and my brain works in sort of one way, and I have one, kind of personality, and I think I feel like wherever I'm at, whether that's maybe a specific meeting that has a point or a specific part of my day, I just think about how to be genuine and authentic and be the best version of me for that moment.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
So for some very fun questions, I love asking these questions, so I always save them to the end. We have one more question, three more questions. So,
Sure.
what superpower do you wish you had that would make your job easier?
I think that the superpower, if I knew the right question to ask that would give me the answer that I needed, I think I'd be hyper efficient. That curious part of me is like, I gotta ask 10 questions to figure out, what I need to know. I've gotta get this, I have a whole chain of things. If I just knew I could ask one and I'd get everything I need, oh boy, I'd get a lot done. Yeah, I'd be hyper efficient for sure.
Yeah, this is kind of like a same follow-up. So what kind of superhero, Marvel, DC, whatever, do you think would ace this kind of job?
Oh, I would call it, I think the job, this might surprise you, because you think about a lot of skill, but I think the superpower is about empathy. I think it's about understanding other people's situation and their context and their lives. Here, what we want to do is we want to empower people. We want to impact their lives. We want to make their lives better. And it's hard to do that if you don't understand what their life is.
Yes.
What it feels like to do jobs, to be in situations, life situations. And I think that superpower of being empathetic is I can understand what it feels like and what it's like to be that person. I think that's the superpower that allows you to make great things. Because it's hard to be part of somebody's life if you don't understand what it is.
Yes. Yeah, putting yourself in other people's shoes. My New Year's resolution was before I get mad, before anything happens, I put myself in that person's shoes, and it's so hard.
It's very, very hard, and it requires a great deal. I think if I were to think about what are the professional skills that you should work on, it's like, well, what's hot now? It's data. It's like, well, no, I'd work on empathy.
Yeah.
I'd work on understanding. You want to be a great collaborator, be empathetic to the person you're collaborating with. What is it like to be them? What are they feeling? What are their challenges? How can I help you?
No.
How could I, support you? Right? How can I make the idea that you have better? And that requires empathy. And that's a skill. It takes practice. It takes great listening.
That's really interesting. I've never heard that answer before. So I was like, yeah, just do whatever you're passionate for. So I like that answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's almost to me it's a misnomer a little bit when people say, oh, just do what you're passionate about, because I feel like it doesn't have any empathy.
Yeah.
I think the better question is, go find a passion that brings meaning to your life.
But how do you recommend someone doing that, right?
Yeah, I have some recommendations. I think you should try more stuff. I think you should make more things. I think you should spend time with more people who are passionate about things. Not your own passion. Go figure out why other people are passionate. Go wake up at 3 a.m. and discover why somebody wakes up at that hour and makes bread or delivers things. Go ask people what's fulfilling about their job. And collect all that, and that will inform your own. I think that's a much think that helps people give direction and helps you understand your own passion. Because when you go out, passion is has more dimensions than people think. People are passionate because they've developed certain skills and they just want to use them for good. People are passionate because they want to take on a big challenge. I want to make a difference to sustainability on the planet. People are passionate because they've had a lived experience. Maybe them, a loved one, somebody that cares for you, or somebody you care about has been impacted, maybe in a good way, maybe in an ugly way. And people have passion for learning, right? There's all sorts of ways to look at it. So expanding the notion of your own passion, I think, comes from exploring other people's.
Thank you so much, Steve Scallen, for sitting down and answering my questions. I really seem to connect with Steve's curiosity, and I hope going forward I can take his advice on trying out new things and always asking more questions. I hope everyone who watches this interview does the same, and let's see where it takes us. Thank you so much for watching this video, and stay tuned to see who I learn about next.